Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Our topic for this video is Newton's laws of motion. First of all, when we're talking about Newton's laws of motion, you have to understand what a force is. A force, very easily defined, it's a push or a pull exerted by one object on another object. So it's a push or it's a pull. And forces, they're vectors. And by vectors, that means they have a magnitude, they have a strength. One force could be stronger than another force. And then there's a direction. And for example, this force right here, it's a push, it's going there, that's the direction. And this pull going there, that's the direction. So one force could be stronger than another because they have magnitudes. And then they have directions. A little more on forces, there are two kinds. One is a contact force. These are forces acting on two objects that are in direct contact, so they're touching each other. And number two, if you have contact forces, you have non-contact forces. The two objects are exerting forces that are not in contact. They are separated. For example, perfect example is a magnet. Diba? It's exerting a pulling force on metallic objects, pero they're not touching each other, so they are non-contact forces. There are four fundamental forces, four kinds, okay? Number one is gravitational force. Any object that has mass has a gravitational force. Even you have mass. Kahit na how small we are compared to the Earth has a lot of mass. That's why it has a strong gravitational force. The moon, it also has gravitational force. And it's pulling on the waters of the Earth. That's why you have high tides and low tides at different parts of the world, of the Earth, depending on the position of your moon. Diba? So that's gravitational force. Number two, electromagnetic force. And it's named this way because electricity and magnetism, magnets and electricity, always come together. They always come in pairs. You know, one cannot exist without the other. If you have electricity, you'll very likely have magnetism. And when you have magnets, you can also induce electricity. That's why it's electromagnetic. Nuclear force naman are the forces that act on nucleons. So your protons and your neutrons, they have something holds them together. That's nuclear force. And you know what's interesting? Diba yung proton has a positive charge? There are other protons that have positive charges. Why don't they repel each other? Well, actually, they do. They repel each other. So, the protons don't want to be together. They want to fly away in different directions. That's because of the electromagnetic force. Kasi they're both positive. But the nuclear force is much stronger than the electromagnetic force. That's why they're kept together. They're held together because of the nuclear force. And then you have number four, the weak nuclear force. Ito namang weak nuclear force is the interaction between subatomic particles. So there are actually particles even smaller than your protons, smaller than your neutrons. So there are subatomic forces acting inside. So in these weak nuclear force, they play a part in the radioactive decay of atoms. For example, you have two protons here. When they collide, something happens inside the weak nuclear force, and then na-eject yung positron and yung neutrino. Itong dalawang to. So there are actually subatomic, but the atom is not the smallest thing talaga. May subatomic particles pa. Ayan. Ito naman, you have an unstable atom here na so it has so much protons and so many neutrons, and it's unbalanced, and some protons turn into neutrons. So, you know, some positrons and neutrinos got ejected again. You know what? I actually like those names. Positron and neutrino. It could be the names of two cats. Parang cute lang. Anyway, let's proceed. The law of inertia. First law of motion. Law of motion number one. Law of inertia. Consider Finn, who is standing in the middle of nowhere. And there are numerous forces that are acting on Finn. Yan. When you add all these forces together, add this one, vector 1 plus vector 2 plus vector 3, and you calculate this, what results is a net force or a resultant force. And if your net force is not equal to 0, it is called an unbalanced force. And very likely, motion will occur because meron kang unbalanced force. And remember about vectors when you perform vector operations, and we call them resulting vector, resultant vector, or resultant. Ayan siya, oh. Net force or resultant force, because forces are also vectors, diba? It's all coming together with the names of resultant, no? Okay, let's proceed. Inertia. Inertia is a property of matter that resists a change in its state of motion. So whatever is its current state, if it's moving or not moving, it resists a change in that motion. Yung resistance niya na yon, that is inertia. For example, here are two kinds, ano? There are two kinds. Here's one guy trying to push or pull an anvil, and here's a guy trying to stop a moving vehicle. Both are in a certain state of motion. The anvil and the car have a lot of inertia, because the anvil resists to be pushed. Ayaw niyang matulak. And the car resists to be stopped. This one is not in motion and it resists to be pushed. This one is in motion and it resists to be stopped. So that is inertia. And please do not try stopping a moving car ever, okay? Okay, law of motion number 2, law of acceleration. When an object is subjected to an unbalanced force, it is accelerated in the same direction as the force. You remember Finn kanina, when a lot of forces are acting upon him, when we perform vector operations on all those forces, we get a resultant force. Pag hindi siya 0, if it's unbalanced, nagkakaroon siya ng motion. Ayun, no? It is accelerated. It's accelerated in the same direction of your unbalanced force. Okay? Let's study this equation a little bit further. Ano? Force is equal to mass times acceleration. The acceleration of an object is directly proportional to the force. If you have a stronger force, you have a stronger acceleration. Ayun yun. So, for example, we have two people here, and they're going to try to push these boxes. Both these boxes have a mass of 5 kilograms. Pero this lady over here will push it with a force of 100 newtons, and this guy only 50 newtons. What happens is, ayun, mas malayo yung isa because she exerted a stronger force. The acceleration was much higher. Ayun. On the other hand, it is inversely proportional to its mass. Yung acceleration, acceleration is inversely proportional to its mass. The more mass, the less acceleration. For example, the same two people. So, etong guy, hindi siya magpapatalo. Sabi niya, oh, I'm gonna push it with 100 newtons na rin. Pero, the two objects now have two different masses. One has 5 kilograms, the other 10 kilograms. The effect is, ayun, ang layo, and ito, kalahati lang. Because it has double the mass as the other one. So that's the relationship of acceleration to the force and the relationship of the acceleration to its mass. Alright, let's study this a little further. Some things to note. The net force F, okay, is the resultant force acting on the body. Do not include the forces the body is acting on others. For example, in this system right here, this rocket is exerting a force, a pushing force towards this direction, and then this the tension in this string is pulling the table, and maybe this guy is standing on the edge, he's exerting a force, and these are the forces of gravity. Ayan. So we take into account all the forces acting on the body. Okay, on the body. Number 2, force and acceleration are vectors. They have a magnitude, they have direction. Number 3, the equation may be applied to an entire system or just a part. We could consider the whole thing or maybe just this particular leg. Pwedeng ganun. Maybe the whole system or maybe just this rocket over here. Pwede yon. So it depends, ano? It depends on your problem. You could say para siyang point of view, a perspective. It depends on what is being considered. Third law of motion. Number 3, law of interaction. Sometimes it is called the law of action and reaction. You'll see why. Because the law of interaction, it says that for every action, every force, there is an equal but opposite reaction. Okay, it's that easy. For example, you have a force of 50 newtons going in that direction. The reaction is like this. It's also 50 newtons pero in the opposite direction. Another one, a force of 13 newtons going in that direction. What would be the reaction? It would be like this. Ayan o. Going, papunta doon, pero 13 newtons. Equal, but opposite reaction. Some things to note on action and reaction. Action and reaction always come in pairs. These are also called action-reaction pairs. The two forces are applied on different objects. This is why they do not cancel out. To illustrate that, look at these figures right here. So there's this guy who is exerting force 1. He is pushing the object. And there's this lady who is pushing the object with force 2. This is not, okay, this is not an action-reaction pair because forces F1 and F2 act on the same object. Okay, the receiver of the force is the same. So, hindi siya law of action and reaction. Plus, they cancel each other out in this way. They can cancel each other out. Now, this is action-reaction. This guy, okay, he's exerting force 1 on the object, and the object is exerting force 2 on that guy. So, this is an example of an action-reaction pair. Force 1 on the ball by the person, force 2 on the person by the ball. Okay? And this is what's interesting, This is what's interesting. Action-reaction pairs, they do not cancel out. Okay? So, you can imagine ikaw, so imagine you are doing push-ups. Imagine you are doing push-ups on the earth. You are actually exerting a force on the earth. And the earth is exerting a force on you. And the earth does not move. It does not move because its mass is so large. The acceleration that you're giving the earth is almost zero. Almost zero. So the earth is exerting the same force on you who has a small mass. Kaya meron kang acceleration. That is how push-ups work. You're actually exerting force on the earth, the whole earth. Ganun yun. Okay. So that is the end of my presentation. I hope meron kayo napulot, meron kayo naintindihan. And if you have some questions, you could leave comments on the comment section and check out the other video. See ya!